Hello everybody and welcome to Cabaret Secrets. This is Gary Williams and today is a happy day for me because I get to spend most of the day with a dear friend of mine, Lisa Cottrell. I know you've been working with Belinda King for a long time. What exactly is your job title there? I know you're very important.
My job title is Artistic Director, which is really creative director as well, creating all the concepts for the shows, directing, casting, choreographing and installing product on ship.
So it sounds like everything from beginning from a blank piece of paper to figuring out what we're going to call the show, what's it going to look like, what's the theme going to be, how we're going to cast it. And you really head up all of that.
Yes, I do. And sometimes it comes from the client and sometimes it comes from my head. Depending on what's required. Sometimes it's a product that's required. We need a new show to go on to replace an existing show and the client would want something similar, in which case it's my job to come up with something similar but different, which is always the ask, which is the hardest one.
Do you have an opinion on the BBC's old edict of educate and to entertain?
Well, I believe you can do that. I don't know that it has its place so much now with cruising audiences. I think their attention spans are shorter. I think they're what I call a televisual audience, which is always the immediate and no thinking required on some occasions. So I would like to believe that, and I personally like to think that if you can give someone an insight into something else that they normally wouldn't think about, then if that's called educating, that's fine by me, and I think it's a good thing. Whether it actually washes so well these days with a cruising audience, I don't know. I've done quite well with introducing poetry, introducing more classical dance, introducing kind of off-the-wall ideas that have done very well and been very successful, some of our most successful shows. But now things are changing, so I don't know whether I'd get away with it quite so much.
You've read Cabaret Secrets, you're in Cabaret Secrets already. I talk a lot about the template, a template structure, a way to put a show together, to way to build a show. Do you follow some kind of template, a structure with, but you're also worried about not becoming formulaic? How do you work?
I mean, there is a structure. I think the structure for me is a similar one. The difference being I've got lots more people on the stage, so I can, there are certain things within your structure and your formula that wouldn't work for me.
Well, they look better in tights than I do.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say that. Not with those lovely calves. So, yes, I mean, everyone can find an opening number, I always say. The hardest number to find in a production show is the second.
Why?
It's like your second album or the second book or the second, because an opening number is usually big, here we are, everyone on stage, bang, bang, bang. Yeah. What do you follow that with? So when I say bang, 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 I mean, we've opened shows with a classical waltz or a mazurka or something like that, but it's still difficult to find that next number that sort of isn't too big, isn't too energy-wise, isn't too much, because the opening has been. The second number is always the one that is the hardest.
I always look for the second number for me is something which I've come on in this burst of probably less than 2 minutes of an opening. It's short, snappy, bang, I'm here. My second number needs to be, for me, medium speed, needs to give everybody just to sort of sit back a little bit, the lights aren't going crazy anymore, and they can sit back and think, okay, do we like this guy? What's this all about now? He's come on, that's fine. Let's see, settle down number. Let's see. And at the same time, I'm doing the same with them. It gives me a moment that I'm not having to do much except just sing a nice, easy, medium-paced song, and I can just walk around and check them out and see, okay, what have we got here and who have we got in? And maybe there's some people over there I can have some fun with later on in the show. And it just gives everybody a chance to settle down, whilst at the same time setting a tone for what's going to come as well. Are you looking for a similar kind of, would you describe it in similar ways?
Yeah, I think if I've opened with all the dancers, which we sometimes just use the dancers in a production show to open with, then obviously I'm going to bring the singers on for the second number, because otherwise people will be saying, well, where are the singers? Because that's a big thing in production shows on ships. It is singing and dancing, and they like to see a nice even balance of the two. So if I open with a waltz or something, then the next thing I've got to do is bring those singers on. But I can't bring them on, absolutely screaming their hearts out, because we'll have peaked far too soon. And we need to, again, so quite a lot of the time I'll find something in the middle that just introduces the singers to the public, a little bit like yourself, so that the audience can say, oh, here are the singers, and they've got time to look at all 4 of them, or 5, how many there are. And yeah, it is their introduction to the show. So it isn't necessarily all big jazz hands kind of here we are thing. But the other number that's the hardest one to find is what I call the pre-finale, the one before the end, because quite often your bang, bang, bang end is easy to find. The one before it that kind of sets it up.
The one before the bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, the one before finale is always...
Because when I say bang, 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 I'm talking about 3 separate numbers. You're talking about the same thing. So you're talking about like the 4th or 5th number from the end you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about bang, bang, bang as in...
One big number.
One big number.
Right, so the one just before that to set up... And the bang, bang, bang thing, the big number, would you always follow that with an encore sort of thing as well? Or are you talking about the bang, bang, bang being the last thing, so it's
the big finale is the big bang at the end.
And that's it, then they're off.
And that's it. And then, well, we have calls and all that.
Bows and all that. But so the tricky one is the one before the last number.
The absolute sod to find. Can I say sod?
You can say sod, yeah.
I was going to say something else, but I didn't.
I would say people would write in and complain, but nobody's listening anyway, so it doesn't matter. Say what you like.
I'll say the other one
just
too. Yeah, the one before the end is that. So where do we go? We don't want to peak too soon again. We want to keep people, and usually that's what quite a lot of singing shows that I do for Seaborn particularly, I call it the 11 o'clock slot, which is like, it's probably the big ballad, which has got a big finish and and then we can hit the public with the big bang finale.
Yeah.
So certainly with my vocal groups, I would do a big ballad and probably a female ballad at the end.
And it's finding a ballad that I'm the same, and for me the obvious choice, which I do, is My Way, because it's a song. I'm looking for a song that ticks the boxes that My Way does, and there aren't many of them. I can't find many of them anyway that I can sing well. That are not. It's not just a ballad, but it's an emotional one. It's got tell some kind of story, or really get whatever it does. It's got to get people. It's got to hit people in the heart and move them in some way and evoke some kind of feeling from them, rather than just being a nice song. It's got to be powerful, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of songs in the singer shows on the Cunard ships that I call my anthemic songs, and that always works as a stirring of the emotion.
What's that song that Bublé finished his Madison Square Garden concert? It's there have been so many places in my life and time. Is that it? Is it this song?
It's called Song for You. It's a Donny Hathaway song called Song for You.
And that's perfect, isn't it? Because it's like a theme. It is an anthem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is from him to them.
It's sort of a signature. It
another song a bit like that is For All We Know, which is a little gentle. It doesn't have that, because that it's all like The Party's Over is that sort of thing. But what those songs don't have is this. They're not very impressive vocally.
No.
You need to go out with a big rousing.
Those songs, those particular ones, For All We Know, and what was the other one?
The Party's Over.
The Party's Over.
Those nice sort of goodbye songs. Every time we say goodbye,
they inform the audience too that it's coming to an end. So just by the lyric and the feel of it is like, okay, I'm wrapping up here, and everyone gets into that kind of mellower kind of, this was a lovely show.
Wasn't so bad after all.
And
Nearly
we've had
over
a
now.
lovely time.
Food's up soon.
Yeah, and we'll just go and get a martini after this. And so it evokes a sense of it's all wrapping up and we're all, it's kind of comforting, I think, that song, those songs.
There is a big difference, isn't there, between being a production singer in a show that's created to being a guest entertainer with your own show and it's just you and the band.
It's a huge difference, and I'd like £1 for every time one of the production singers has said to me, I could do that. And I just want to laugh half the time because I think you wouldn't have a clue. Because, you know, there's one thing being supported by a team of creatives that put you into the show. They've chosen you, they've auditioned you, they've put you through a very difficult rehearsal process, supported. And through all your tech run, and then you've had a director in front of you, like myself, you know, supporting you all the way through. All the shows are on, then I wave goodbye and leave you there. And they're all very looked after by my company anyway, the company I work for. They are extremely well supported and looked after. So therefore, after that, the singing of the songs, the doing the shows is just a lovely, lovely thing to do, and it's what they've wanted to do, and it's great. A few months in, of course, a little bit of boredom sets in, and they've started to watch people like yourself. Now, I send my singers, part of their thing is to go and watch these performers, because for them to learn a bit of craft, which is what they don't have. They don't have any stagecraft. We've talked about this before. They don't have anywhere to go and learn that stagecraft, really. And all the musical theatre schools rule out any kind of cabaret stroke variety as a career. So they have no knowledge of it. They only have what they see on a ship, which, as we know, is a little bit of a bubble in itself. And then they think, I can do that. Now, I'm probably doing a couple of them a disservice in that there are a couple of them that have worked for us that have gone on and developed their own show and have done quite nicely. But not without huge help from myself and my musical directors and people like that to help them even choose a song list. Because the other sort of fallacy that's hanging around is that not all performers know what's good for them. And I think when you're told what to sing is one thing. When you have to choose what to sing, it's a whole other ball game. And they don't realise how hard it is to choose the right material, which is what you do really well, which is what other friends of ours that we know in the business do really well. And that comes with time and a lot of experience, and they don't have that. And sadly don't have anywhere to learn it. I think that's the...
Until Cabaret Secrets, of course, Lisa.
Until Cabaret Secrets came out. Wait for the movie.
Can anybody do it? Can anybody be a guest? I mean, presuming they've got, they're able to sing, they've got a voice, and for this purposes, we're just talking about singing. So let's say, can any of your production singers be, with the right training and attention, could they be a successful act in their own right? It's an interesting question.
Some.
Not all.
No.
And those that can't, what is it they haven't got?
I was going to say talent, but I don't think that's fair.
But it's not fair, is it? Because you've hired them, and they could shine brilliantly in your shows.
Voices, very talented. We have some really...
But I'm assuming the people you're thinking of do great in your shows, otherwise you wouldn't hire them, right? So they're obviously talented.
They're all talented, they're all enthusiastic, they're all, raring to go professionals who
They'll sing well, they'll move well, they've got some acting ability, they'll look good. So what is it?
One of the main things, of course, is being able to speak to people on a microphone. Most of them aren't taught to speak. They're taught to sing and learn harmonies and move from A to B without bumping into the furniture and things like that. So the gift of the gab, I, as you know, in some of my shows, the singers usually have a little bit of chat, which I sort of change around according to ability. Some of them are great at it, and some of them are dreadful. Now, I think that's a natural ability. I don't think you can teach them. And I have to, if I see that they're struggling, then I try and coach them. But it has to come from the person. I think you've seen somebody recently on one of the ships who you said was brilliant.
And it is unusual that when you see the people in a production show that have that ability to speak very naturally to an audience, and because I know what they're saying is scripted because you've scripted it, but you obviously allow them to tweak it a little bit, and so they make it their own. But still, presumably it's going to be the same. However, once they've made it their own, what they do with that is going to be the same, exactly the same. So I know that they're following a script, and it's very refreshing to see people from a musical theatre trained discipline to be able to speak very naturally on the microphone as if they're just addressing one person, and without it sounding like, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. In 1954, the blah, 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 and it was number one, and we'd like to... oh, God.
It's awful.
God.
It's awful.
Don't even say shut up,
One of the interesting things is that I always give out the script for the show, and I say, cast your eyes over this. Have a little think about it. It's not Shakespeare. It's not written in blood, but it's a structure, because we have to keep, with 4 singers on the stage, we have to keep to timing, and we have to keep a structure, and the guys upstairs need cue lines and things like that.
Right.
So there has to be something to start with. But I always stress this is our starting point. Now, if you want to change it around, or you can say it better than that, please be my guest, and we'll have a look at it. Interesting, 4 singers, how many of them take that on board, and when they come back to me to do a run of the show, a dialogue run, how many have learnt it by rote, and how many have actually sat down and had a little play with it. It's usually only 1 of 4 that can actually get to grips with, right, I know what she's trying to do here. I need to say, these are the important things I need to say. The date the song was written, or a little bit about the lyricist and the cue line. In between that, I'm not really bothered as long as they don't talk for too long, whether they mess around with it or they don't, or cut it down or lengthen it. I don't mind. 1 out of 4, as a general rule, will do that, and will be able to feel relaxed enough and confident enough to do that. And then maybe 1 other will suddenly get the feel of it and kind of move along in that direction. But never all.
Do you find, though, that if you go back on a ship halfway through a contract, or you see a video of the show, the people that weren't so good at the beginning, do you sometimes find that there's been a marked improvement? And you go, oh, well, it was just because they weren't really used to it, but now they've been doing it for 3 months, they're actually really natural at it.
Yeah. I mean, there's what I call the slow burners, that get there more slowly, and everyone learns differently. So... there's others that if I came in halfway through a contract and said, do you know what, I really want to cut that dialogue there, I'm going to write you some new dialogue to say in there, would probably have a nervous breakdown and cry.
Why?
Because they have learnt it by rote, and if one little word out of place will throw them completely. And they're the ones that, the natural ability, and I call it communication with the audience now rather than talking to them, so that I keep saying, you're communicating with them. Don't talk at them. Don't reel it off like some lines you've learned, for the school play. It's got to sound natural, and therefore you must make it your own. That's the tricky bit. Performers, musical theatre performers that usually are working in production shows, are playing a role of some description, even if it's the number where they wear the raincoat and the hat, even though it's not, probably doesn't have any text. They're still given a sort of persona, and they're acting it through. When you're standing on the stage doing your own thing, you're just yourself. There's nowhere to hide. So those confident people who are confident about who they are, what they say, and how they live and breathe, are the ones that will always find it perfectly natural. The people who need character, the people who need to hide behind something, as an actor does, are the ones that struggle. And yes, in our audition process, I always know who's going to be really good at the chat, because they will have an interview with us. So during that interview, I will just chip in now and again with some stuff that might give me a little idea about whether they can, I ask them what their favourite music is or something, and then if they wax lyrical about Billy Joel for half an hour, I think, they're happy with themselves.
Or if they go, don't know.
They'll go, well, I like lots of music, really. I haven't got anyone in particular I like.
So we're getting good
I
tips.
look
If anybody's going
forward
to
to
go
that.
to one of your auditions,
Yeah.
there's a heads up there on what to do.
Just talk. And I think it just tells you a lot about a person, and you think, that's what I want to come off the stage. That's the personality I want to come off the stage.
If someone's listening to this and is putting together their own show, or is already doing it now, and let's say they've got a great voice and lots going for them, but they know that they feel very uncomfortable and nervous about the chat, and they're listening and thinking, I'm a bit like that. I'm a bit like one of those people that is a bit, lacks a bit of confidence. But let's say they still think they've got what it takes to do a show. I would say, I'm interested in what you think, but I would say they certainly can still do it, but they should keep the chat down to a minimum.
Of course. Yeah, talk about what you're comfortable with. Don't talk about anything that just because you think you should. Minimal chat. Easy. Don't try and be somebody you're not.
Don't try and tell any jokes if you're not very good at telling jokes.
Please, God, don't tell any gags. Keep it short and sweet and personable, I think, and try just to show a little bit of yourself as a person, because people, we've talked about this a lot, that the guests love to know on a ship, love to know about you. So you don't have to make anything up particularly. I mean, probably, you is good enough. You just, if you're not very great at speaking, then keep it short and sweet. But I'm always telling my singers to watch great performers.
Do you think it's important for people doing their own solo show to have a director, the benefit of some direction?
Yes. The worst thing you can do is just assume that you've got it all right from the word go. And, never do the show that you think you're going to take forward onto the professional stage in front of your family, who are going to tell you you're great all the time and give you a standing ovation. And
similar to your peers as well, because I've seen guest entertainers on a ship that have put together a sort of bit of their own show, and they try it out on the ship. So of course everybody comes, all of their friends working on the ship, everybody comes along and they go nuts from as soon as the person's walked on stage, because they're very supportive, and that's wonderful.
Yes.
But it's not always going to be like that, is it?
No, and being supportive is great, but being, I think you have to be really honest and sometimes brutally honest. I mean, if somebody paid for me to go and watch their act that they'd just put together, then they would get a very honest opinion from a guest's point of view. I would put myself firmly in the seat of an audience member and
So
say,
you make sure that they pay you first.
Pay me first.
before you give them the verdict.
Obviously, get the money in your pocket first, because there's no point having lots of people telling you you're great. I mean, as we said before, the singing is only part of it anyway. Your song choices may not be right. You might not have paced the show right. That second number might not be right. And you might be running out of gas before the end of the show. There's a lot of points, energy, the rhythm of the show. Have you got it right? And as you said, funny habits that one can acquire.
Videoing helps, actually.
Yes.
I used to video all my shows.
Brilliant.
And watch them back. I can face it now, but I used to review each show, and sometimes I always say to friends now, I say, look, friends that I respect in the business, I say, look, do me a favour. I did this just last week on a ship. There were a couple of your peers for a different cruise line working on board, and I said, would you do me a big favour and just watch, have a pen and a bit of paper. I gave them a copy of my running order to make it easy for them. I said, just any things that you see. I know at this stage that the show works, and I know there's not going to be nothing horrendous, but it's just, and they told me a couple of things which were just so helpful, because they're relatively new numbers. I've only say relatively new. I've been doing them maybe a year, and they're kind of bedded in. But I always felt a bit uncomfortable with them, and it was so useful to have that.
Oh, certainly, and I think that how you perceive yourself, of course, is never how an audience does. So as you say, little habits that you've slipped into may well have turned into bigger things that you weren't aware of. I think watching yourself back is the best excruciating way of learning. A little bit like, with me learning my lines by tape recorder, because I wasn't a great speaker, a natural line learner. Awful. If I played them back now, I'd want to throw myself out the window, but you have to be critical of yourself to the nth degree.
And I think you have to give other people very clear permission
Yes.
to be critical of you, because it's. I said to these colleagues, I said, I need you to criticise me. I don't need you to say, oh, that was great. Don't waste your time doing that. Just tell me, I want you to tell me some things that I'm not doing well, so I can work on them. And I think you need to give people that permission, because otherwise they're not going to, because if I didn't say to them, ask them to give notes, they would never come up to me at the end of a show and say, oh, good show, but can I just tell you something? Because that's rude. That's not their place to do that. So I think it's up to us as performers to really be clear and say, please tell me absolutely straight, tell me honestly.
But it's funny, because you have asked me to do that before. For you, I didn't
take any notice of what you told me.
Not one scrap of notice.
That's just not true. It was gold dust, gems. Each one a gem.
They were. A couple of other people have, and I've always been very flattered that there's that kind of professional trust thing going on. But every time you can always find something. And every time I've given someone like yourself notes or others, they've always been really grateful and talked about them a lot afterwards and said, I never realised I did that. Or you suggested I did this and it really works. I may well have suggested something that didn't work as well. But, I think that's being, from a performer's point of view, I think that's being responsible to your talent. I think performers have a responsibility, if they're talented people, to be as good as they can possibly be and not be complacent. So I think that's a very generous thing to ask somebody to do. But ultimately, it is all about being true to your talent.
What do you think about, do you ever see any acts that are just seem really rotten, really rubbish, but the punters, the guests, just love them?
I've seen hundreds of acts like that.
You don't look at me when you say that.
I'm not. I'm trying to look over your head. Of course. And there's no accounting for taste, is there?
Right, what's all that about?
But it's a bit like X Factor, isn't it? Or something like that. There's hundreds of people that do okay with a gimmick or for a certain amount of time, and then they kind of fizzle out. But I've seen hundreds and hundreds of acts like that, and I watched and thought, why, how, why do people like them? How did they get there?
But I've sat in, as part of an audience watching acts like that I'm thinking, their voices are bad, like really bad, I'm not just listening with professionals, but bad, and they don't look good, and there's some of those speeches that go on a bit, but everybody stands up and goes crackers at the end. Now a little part of me dies, but I'm fascinated. I'm like, what is it? Because I need to know, despite all of their handicaps, what's making those people respond in such an enthusiastic way. Because if I can capture that and put some of that in my show, then I'm on a winner. And I've come to the conclusion that it's charisma and personality.
Possibly a bit of both. I think self-belief has an enormous part to play.
Confidence.
That confidence. I think a deluded sense of belief in a lot of cases. But I think I've met a lot of performers who truly believe they're fantastic. Now, they may be extremely average, but that self-belief and confidence is what people buy into. We can say it. It's going to be a sweeping generalisation, but the Americans have that in spades.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's hundreds of really, really bad acts in America. There isn't, but a self-belief beyond anything I've ever experienced, which just in the end it kind of wins people over.
Sickening, isn't it?
And it's vile, but what
But
can
it
we
works.
do? And it's always been with us, hasn't it, in the business? There's always been those people.
I find there are big differences between American and British audiences, and if I'm performing always to Brits, then there's a lot of little subtleties actually that I'll do differently. Now, often your audiences on the Queen Mary 2, well, I suppose nearly always, they're going to be very mixed between Brits and Americans. How do you approach that challenge? Do you see that there are differences?
Yeah, I mean, because of the transatlantic thing for the Queen Mary 2, we do get lots of Americans, and I say hallelujah to that, because what the Americans bring to the room is that great sense of fun at being at a show. And as you know well, they are not afraid to stand up and clap. They are not afraid to whoop with joy if they've loved something. And as a performer, that's a tremendous thing. I find British audiences polite.
That was a very polite way of putting it.
Yes, I'm being very careful. For example, I recently went. It's not a singing dancing show. I recently went to the Old Vic and saw a fantastic production of Sweet Bird of Youth, Tennessee Williams play with Kim Cottrell, and which is probably one of the best things I've seen in London for a long, long time. The whole cast was stunning. The production was stunning. The sound was stunning. I mean, everything about it. And I was thrilled to have been there, to have watched it. At the end, I couldn't contain myself. I was on my feet clapping. I was the only person. And there was it was chocker, the Old Vic, with polite applause for something quite simply outstanding. And I wasn't surprised, because it happens on the ships.
And the people in the cast are probably thinking, what more can we do? What else can we give you?
Just about given blood on stage. It's a highly charged emotional piece, and every single person in that cast was stunning.
Give us some of your final words of advice, some top tips from Lisa. For people listening to this, I know we've covered a lot of things in this conversation, but people listening to this that have just put together their own show or are struggling to know where to start, what do you think they should focus on?
Focus on being yourself. Don't try and emulate any other singers. You'll only be compared to them, and nobody wants to be compared. I mean, it's quite nice sometimes for when the public say, oh, you sounded just like so-and-so. That you can take that as a compliment, because they obviously like that singer, so that's fine. But you don't want to base your whole show. I mean, Michael Bublé is huge at the moment. I've heard quite a few Michael Bublé sound-alike lookalikes. It's boring. If people want to listen to Michael Bublé, they'll buy a Michael Bublé CD. Do your homework. Do your research. Practice until you can practice no more. And there's no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. Because at the end of the day, it's you and a microphone and a lot of people, and you're on your own.
Good luck.
Good luck with that.
Thank you for listening to this Cabaret Secrets podcast. If you've got any comments or questions, please visit cabaretsecrets.com, where you'll also find details of the Cabaret Secrets book, an indispensable guide on how to create your own show, travel the world, and get paid to do what you love.